mainly just gray. So
It's peppered.
That's a
Nice enhancement. Yes, it's very distinguished.
I think it's distinguished.
Strangely enough, my twin brother,
agree.
no hint of gray in his hair, and he will lie to my face about whether or not he dyes it or colors it or anything like that. I'm like, there's no way, man.
To be fair, like he got his own share of things.
That's true. He does have one lung and one kidney. All right, so
Exactly.
Feel free. You can ask whatever questions that you want. You can ask about me, about the organization. Like, it's just a free conversation for the next 45 minutes as we kind of get to know not only about Boys and Girls Club and what's going on there, but also about you, which is, I think, is what is the most interesting stories to me.
Yes.
Are why we do what we do.
Now I go really get into the skinny of things, right?
Well, because I've known you for so long, just in the community. Right, but what I don't know.
That's raw. That's like bring the skeleton out.
Well, you feel free to share what you want. This will be edited out. You'd be like, cut the camera.
Not an expose. Not an expose. Yes, strictly entertainment value.
Sure.
But I want to know. For instance, I just want to know like a brief story. Like, tell me about you.
So I love this because I'm always curious to know, like, what makes all of us tick, right? What do we do, what we do? And for me, I was really blessed to find my path at a time where I was going through some personal things. I had just lost my mom and taking care of my siblings. I was like 18 then, so don't do the math. But I had the opportunity to work with at-risk young people. So these were individuals who were expelled from the regular school system for whatever reason, was not in the normal comprehensive school system that we're at, Valley Community School. And I just fell in love with the work. Right. First of all, I was running an after school program. Coincidentally, it's like 365 here or 360. And so anyway, I started as a support staff, running an after school program as an intervention for individuals who were involved with gangs. And, the community at that time, the label that they were given was that these were bad kids, And I'm like, not really. They're just made bad decisions and they're just really unique soul. Like, they defied all things that they're not supposed to. And to me, that was like leadership traits, right?
It's such an easy label that we can throw on some of these youth and these kids. Be like, oh, well, they're just bad.
Bad kids.
Without taking any time whatsoever to just like actually get to know their situation or what's going on. I think once you do that, I think you see a lot of, it's like an onion, right?
Yes.
You're kind of uncovering a lot of layers right there.
And they're just kids.
Yeah.
Right?
Exactly.
I mean, if we can think about how we behaved at that time, right? I mean, we were all bad kids in that sense, right?
With no social media, right? No, there was
exactly.
I can't imagine what my life would be like if there was social media around when I was that young.
I would have been really bad then. I would tell you. So I was really bad. I mean, so I was good, and then I became really bad because, I want to hang out with my brothers and his friends. And so, but I wasn't that bad, right? I just wanted to do cool stuff, like all teenagers want to do. So anyways, the one thing that really like opened up my eyes were, I conducted this survey. It was like 100 best community survey type stuff. And there were like a ton of questions on there. And so we administered this survey to about 200 kids. And some answered some question and some didn't answer some other questions. But there was this one particular question, and it asked, if you had the opportunity to make a positive difference, would you do it? Every single one of them answered yes. Mm-hmm. I mean, these were like bad kids, right? Mm-hmm. In juvenile hall and all of that, and yet they want to make a positive difference. And I'm like, there it is. These kids are really good kids. They just can't help their circumstances or whatever it may be. So then I went down the rabbit hole. I went down the rabbit hole. And so got into a lot of stuff. And here I am again.
Right back. Well, so did you grow up, are you from Merced? Did you grow up in Merced?
Yes. So I lived on 10th Street, so in South Merced, right next to McNamara Park. Went there and everything else. Went through all the school system. Hated Merced like everybody does, right? There's nothing to do. There's nowhere to go. There's no jobs. And I was supposed to move, of course, to a big city, LA,
Of course.
right? Or New York. And I did go, but I couldn't. So I had to come back for whatever reason. But then I didn't want to go to college, interestingly. Interestingly, I was actually an honors student, dropped out because I wanted to hang out with my friends who were in different classes. Didn't fit in with the, classmates. So I dropped out of AP and honors, and I went and stayed hung out with my friends. Don't want to go to college. And then realized, you know what? That's probably the only thing that's going to help me in life. So I better go. So I did. I went without like a real plan of what I wanted to do.
Where did you go to college?
Started at Merced College.
Merced College?
Mm-hmm. Started there. Thought I was going to be a lawyer, of course.
My parents wanted me to be a lawyer. That was like their. I was the last child that they had hopes for, apparently, because my older brother, he went into film school, and then my brother was immediately like, I'm gonna go into acting, and my parents were just like, we need you to be a lawyer. It didn't work out for them.
Happened?
It didn't work out, as it turns out.
Well, so I went to college, and this was in Arkansas, and I just didn't really have like a path. Like I didn't know. Like I was an honor student in high school. I did AP classes. I tested out of a majority of my gen ed classes in college. So then I kind of spent my first year of college doing every single class that I thought might be interesting. So like I did like I took a lot of psychology. I did statistics. There was a time that I was gonna join seminary. Like there was like I was like dabbling in just about everything that you could dabble in, and then I wound up in theater.
I have to ask though, how did you do in statistics?
I was, I think, 2 months into that class when I'm like, this is nothing at all that I thought it was going to be.
Yeah.
When I started to really dive deep, I'm all like, this is not me. So
I had some friends that were lawyers at that time, like, no way am I going to be that.
I'm good.
So there I was like, okay, where do I go from here? Now, by this time, I was already getting my BA, poli-sci major, thinking that's the route, right? And I'm like, no, let's deviate.
Let's change. Remember that day when I told my folks, I was like, hey, I'm just going to get a Bachelor of Fine Arts degree. And they're like,
what?
Why would you do this to us? They've since come around. So
yeah, as it turns out, and look where you are now.
Yeah, it's so weird. Like pathways are weird.
Well, I always say, if you don't have a path, he'll figure it out for us, right?
Exactly.
We'll be right where we need to be.
Amen to that.
And so you graduated college.
I did. It took me a little while,
yeah.
so I didn't have like this straight shot of anything, right? I mean, I didn't want to go to college. I just knew I had to.
Yeah.
So I was working full-time jobs, part-time jobs, going to school, taking care of my siblings. And so it's like I had no social life, right? Mm-hmm. And so I was probably not the kindest person, but I was like, I'm going to get this done. And I need to survive. So I did. It took me a little while, I think, to finish up my college years. It probably took me 6 years to get my BA finally. Then I took a sabbatical, did the whole life thing. And then I decided to go back after some time to get my MBA. And the reason is, you'll love this part, was because I knew that I didn't want to be in any institution. There's too many red tapes, right? And remember, poli-sci.
Right.
As much as I love politics and everything else, I hate it as well. And all the bureaucracy that comes with it, right?
There's so much.
Yes, that's why I'm a nonprofit for that reason. And so, but I hated chasing after dollars. It's like, there's got to be a better way of doing this. So I went to business school, and I'm like, let's figure out all the business component of running an organization, because it's more than just doing some social good, right?
It's
really
more than
about
the impact, I think. I think we
It
lose sight
is.
on that a lot.
Absolutely. You know, you're United Way.
Yeah, well, we run into that a lot. I mean, it's everyone. Well, how about this? For the most part, no one gets into nonprofit work for the administrative work. Like, that's not really why we kind of
Agreeing.
jump into that field. So,
Absolutely.
but I do think it's important to know enough about, like, business administration. I mean, because that is where everything gets like locked into that space eventually, and you're like, how do I get out of this space?
Well, it's whether you make it or not.
Yeah.
It's that darn business model. And I was like, I got to get good at doing this. Because I hate, believe it or not, I know I'm the director over at the Boys and Girls Club. I hate begging for money. I would rather have a business model that has diverse revenue streams, that's self-funded. But we have some ways to go on that. So
it's so difficult, I think, to
Yeah.
make that realization too, right? Like, sometimes we think, well, if we just write the grant, or if we just ask for the donation, what it doesn't take into account, right, is, well, what happens if you don't get that grant, or
Right.
what happens if that funder maybe you get so lucky you get that angel funder, but that person moves or
Right.
goes away, or for whatever reason, like, and is no longer available. Like, having, I think, other revenue streams, I think, is really
Absolutely.
important for a nonprofit to continue the work that they want to be able to do.
Absolutely. So, and I think a part of my lack of desire to ask for money is I used to sell Cutco knives. Do you guys have a set? So that was one of my gigs because, of course, I had a full-time job, part-time job, and just needed some other revenue stream, right? And I hate it. Product was wonderful, but I just like, my network is not people who want Cutco knives or can afford Cutco knives, right? And so just getting in was difficult. And so I think that every time I think of having to ask, I think about my Cutco experience.
It's like
great product, though.
It's like post-traumatic stress going
Yes.
on. Like, you're visioning
Here I
that
go.
ask right there.
Yeah.
So you say that you took care of your brothers and sisters?
I did.
And what were the age ranges? Like what are we?
Wow. It was terrible, I would have to tell you. I had a 6-year-old, a 9-year-old. One was, I think, 16, 17. That's
Wow.
why. Yeah.
easy.
And then there was like another something of some teenage years in there too. So there was in total about 4 to 5
Doing
siblings. Yeah.
Going to college,
Yeah.
having multiple jobs just to support you and your
Right.
family.
We ate ground beef for a lot of months.
All in Merced.
All in Merced.
All in Merced.
You know, I don't think I'd be able to do it anywhere else. So that's why I stayed in Merced. Honestly.
Talk about that. What makes you say that? I'm really curious.
Because it was affordable then,
Mm-hmm.
right? And it was small enough where, because I couldn't, I mean, we had this dinky little car. I got it for like $300 or something like that. And thank goodness Optimus helped pay for this car too. And it was given to me at a very discounted rate. But I didn't have AC or anything like that. I mean, the whole engine was like smoky and all that at some point. But anyway, it was close. It was small enough where my brothers and sisters can walk to school, and I can go to work. So I know that they can get to and from. And it was small enough that they can go to work within the area that we were living in. And the apartment that we lived in was affordable. I made $900 at that time from my full-time job. My rent was $550. And I didn't have I only had my insurance, which was like $100 and something at that time. Thank God. It's unaffordable now. But we barely made it. So that's why I had to have my part-time gigs. But it was fun. I mean, I think those were the best times, the best growing times for us, for sure.
Like, I can only imagine like what you kind of learned, or how much that has kind of like affected your perspective.
Oh,
right,
yeah.
of the work
in
that
hindsight,
you do now.
not going
Always in
through
hindsight,
it.
right?
Yeah.
Well, I never think we realize that, right?
Right.
I don't think we realize how much, and I think this is what's important about the work that you do, especially with children, is how influential
Absolutely.
that those times are, right?
Absolutely.
And how even being able to, like you said, being able to provide even like a positive experience, a positive role model, further education, like, being able to provide those experiences to at-risk youth, or just really any youth. And we always say at-risk youth, but
everybody's at risk.
but that's what I mean. Everyone's at risk because we're all living on like the razor's edge. Like, what is that statistic? There's like that, like in Merced, like people are less than a month away from losing. If they lost their job today, they wouldn't be able to really support themselves. They have no safety net whatsoever.
It's true.
And so whereas we have families that are fine right now, or kids that are fine right now.
Yep. Well, and I think that's such a great analogy, right? Because I do go back to that when I'm working in the nonprofit world, right? I'm like, I feel like I'm a mom supporting a bunch of kids on nothing, and I'm like, I need to change this, right? Because I can't operate haphazardly trying to raise a family. And I'm like, I've kind of been there, and I was like, I don't want to go back there.
Right.
So it's like, how do we do things differently to get out of this kind of survival mode? It's a horrible feeling, and I'm just like, I don't want to do that.
But what about, since we've luckily discussed, I think, everything, but we should discuss very specifically. I know that we interviewed you a month or so ago about this, but about Boys and Girls Club. Like, what are some challenges that you are experiencing within the county, within the organization? Some challenges, some success stories. What would you like to share about the organization?
Well, I would say if you were to ask me this 20 months ago, it would be very different, which is a blessing, right? So about 20 months ago when I first started, and interesting, it's only been 20 months, feels like decades, but...
I think that's just nonprofit work sometimes.
Yeah. It's like every day is just a day. Yeah, like everything runs into each other. But so I think starting out, it was survival, right? Kind of what we talked about is, oh my God, I look down our bank account, I'm like, oh my goodness, how am I going to run programs? But right now, today, we're at a very different place. Yes, funding is always an issue, but we've been very blessed in that there were funding that were made available through the school district that has really allowed us to not only grow our capacity within but also it's kind of like a fine line, right? It's a double-edged sword. It's like when you expand, the opportunity is there, and then now you're building your capacity, and so it's like these two things happen all at once, which is incredible. But I would say that working with the school district, not only have we been able to serve more kids beyond the city of Merced, which we have traditionally done in the last 30 years. This summer, we served about probably close to 600-700 kids throughout the county, which is the beautiful thing, right? But it's also one of the challenges. Scaling has been incredible for us. We went from literally 10, 15 staff to about over 60 this last summer, as well as last summer, which was our first kind of go around last year. We went from a budget of about 400 to about 1.6, and that's in partnership with the school district. And it sounds like a lot, right? But it's money in, it's money out. It basically covered the cost that we have to program, right?
I think that's two major things. One, to me, is the work that you've done in the last 20 months, because a lot of people, hopefully if anyone actually watches this, realize that you are more than just the building in Merced City.
Oh, absolutely.
And you've become more than just that building, and you've grown to all over the county with some of the programs and the after school workshops and everything that you're doing. And I think it's important to notate that is a real success on you, on your board, your staff.
Absolutely.
Like that should be celebrated. Like you're like, hey, we're more than just these walls. Like we reach the entire county, and here's where we're going for. I think it's also important to note that sometimes, especially when you or a larger organization, or you even get those bigger grants, that people don't know. They're like, well, they have plenty of money. And very often it is that case where it's money in, money out. Like, we got a grant. Unfortunately, that grant pays for what it's supposed to pay for.
Well, technically, with grants, it's money out.
It's just money out. Exactly.
And then you'll get money in.
Most of the time,
yes.
yes.
So you do have to front load a lot of these funds. And I think that's why some nonprofits can't scale.
Sure.
Is because it takes money to make money, unfortunately. And if you don't have the infrastructure set up, it's just difficult to be able to scale. We got very blessed because we were able to leverage resources both locally from local foundation as well as national entities that has dollars that we were able to front load some of these contracts to get those reimbursable backs. So it's been immensely insane how we've scaled. It's been incredible because we've been able to serve so many families and children. We hope to continue to do that. But again, I think the one thing that has allowed us, number one, our work is really important, right? And I want to be very clear about that. That's why we're so driven as an organization, is that if we don't address our issues now, given the pandemic, our kids will be worse off than we are.
Sure.
Right. And the statistics shows that kids are, years and years of reading below grade level, years and years of math level is very low, even worse than reading. And then, of course, with obesity rate, with our young people, what they're having to face. And if we really look at the trajectory, it's going nowhere, right? Even if they are successful. So all of these are alarming for us as an institution that provides services to young people. So it creates an urgency for us to be able to think outside of the box and really address it, right? What it used to be 30 years ago was just basically providing a safe space for young people. Now we're really looking at the whole child and their families, right? And making sure that they are truly set up to excel in life. And we might just be that first introduction to a lot of different things. Our goal is to spark that love for something that would encourage them to go to school, kind of like, some of us finding our kind of passion to continue to keep going.
Right.
We need to instill that very early on with our kids. And especially in rural communities, there's absolutely hardly anything out there. I can't say nothing because there's a lot of faith-based organizations and youth services as far as sporting goes. But in terms of having a center for young people to explore a different interest than sport, because I know not all of us are athletes. I'm certainly tried to be, but I was a bench warmer.
I attempted at a very young age to be very sporty.
Exactly.
It just didn't quite work out.
Hey, same here. So I stuck my nose in a book instead, and I found refuge there. But I think the work that we do is really important, and I think that's why it's easier for me to sell it. My heart is in it. Well,
not as your heart in it, but you've been doing it.
I've been doing it.
It goes back to
20 years ago.
Don't worry about these kids. These are bad kids, and you're like, no, they're not. They're not.
And it's funny because my journey was never a straight shot. Yeah. At the end of the day, one of the things I learned, and I absolutely still stand by it, was that if I could find a kid a job, I will probably get him out of a gang. I will save his life. And so not only am I looking to provide support to young people to get out of, these kind of generational cycles, but I'm like, how do I support our local economy so we can shift this mindset that Merced is nothing, right? Because I have learned to love Merced. So I'm like, who's talking bad about Merced? Hold on a second. That's my house, right? So it's developed this community pride as well. Like, I grew up in Merced, and Merced is incredible. And by the way, Merced did this, right? So not only are we talking about, providing support to young people, I also want to look at, the economic opportunities that we can create with our workforce and our economy as well. So everything that I've done kind of has those little segments in there.
Well,
and
that's why, in my mind, we really wanted you, because this is the inaugural thing that we're trying here, right? This podcast interview. But I thought of you first, right? One, because in my mind, that's where it starts, right? It starts with the kids at a certain age, right?
Yes.
Because then that's where if we could, affect those lives, right? And try and figure out ways to put kids and youth on a better path, what that shows, maybe not to you and I, right? Maybe not necessarily but generationally, like you said, breaking those generational systems that have been put in place, tackling those large disparities that occur, especially in rural areas. I think that is really, in my mind, the way to how do we deal with that? How do we tackle that?
Right.
Working together.
Yes.
Figuring out how to where we could place ourselves within that system to be able to tackle that, because you can't do it by yourself.
No.
And that's
Not at
why
all.
we want to support you. And
Thank you.
hopefully people will watch this and want to support you, because I know you have challenges, right? Like, what are some of the largest challenges that you're experiencing, like, currently? Or what's keeping you up at night? Like, that's what we ask.
Yeah, that's exactly
There are
it.
certain things that
Yeah.
keep me up at night. Like, what is it that's keeping you up at night?
Seriously, the first is going to be program quality, right? And I say that because the median age of my staff right now is like 20. And so if I was talking to a friend of mine, I'm like, you know what? I don't want watered down programs. We are the only youth serving organization in Merced County beyond the school system. We are the only nonprofit community-based organization. We need to deliver the best in-house in programs and services, which means we need talent, right? Which means then that equals better pay or people who are just willing to come and volunteer, which is hard to bet on, right? And I don't expect people to volunteer because I know we all need to feed our families too. So I get that. So I would say the thing that really keeps me up at night is, number one, my program quality, because those kids are so important to me that when they leave my place or when they're in my home, I'm like, I want to make sure they have the best in service, kind of like you do for your own family, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Same thing. And so when I'm looking at you or talking to someone else, I'm like, yeah, we have the best in programs. Thank you very much. And then the other thing is capacity, right? Which goes hand in hand is we need support from HR perspectives, and I don't mean like just throw somebody in there. I'm like, I need to have someone that knows HR policies and procedures that can create an institutional infrastructure that will help us scale, right? Same thing with our bookkeeping and accounting. So those core kind of areas are the things that keeps me up now. Funding, I think that, and I could be, kind of optimistic about this, but I think if we could build out those core, funding is going to be a cakewalk to some degree.
I think there's something to be said that, again, like, first thing we talked about, you build a strong product.
Yep.
And then you have a strong administrative backbone. I think in my mind, maybe I'm also being like way too optimistic. It's like, well, yeah, like if you build it, they will come, right? I'm field of dreaming this right now. Like,
right.
But I do think that if you create a strong product and then you back that up with strong administrative business minded ethic, that people will come. Like if you're delivering quality programs for kids all over the county, people are going to take part of that, and then people are going to want to be a part of that as well.
Absolutely.
At least in my mind.
Those are the core kind of challenges at the very ground level, right? And then there's the overarching things that really keeps me up, and that is because our facility has the potential to be impacted by the high-speed rail or the expansion of rail services on the Union Pacific. We are really looking at relocating, one. And then second, we've been looking to establish a bricks and mortar or a stronger presence on the west side. Yeah. And so there's the relocation, there's the expansion, and of course, in all of this is always the sustainability component, right? How do we just keep our doors open and our services available? So those are the three kind of key buckets that's overarching beyond the kind of knee deep at the ground level kind of work that keeps me up. Are those three things: is expansion, relocation, and sustainability. So and we're moving in all the same direction all at once. All the balls are in the air, and I'm just like, goodness, I'm so grateful. I am a juggler and jack of all trades and master of none, right?
I feel the same way every day, right? What are some ways, like, if the community can come together and support you?
There's so many different ways. We always say there's treasure, time, and talent. Give us your time, whether it's sitting on an ad hoc committee to advise us on where we need to go, right? I know that at some point that's going to could become a really hot topic for this community, especially, geographically where we go is going to be really significant. So sitting on ad hoc committees, serving our fundraiser committee, there's your talent as well. As I said, we want to teach our kids a plethora of opportunities and skill sets, including life skills. So anybody with any talent in anything that is willing to share, spend an hour with our kids, I take that, right? Sometimes resources is more than money, actual dollars. So there's time, there's talent, and then there's treasure. If you don't have the time, but you want to write us a check or you want to connect us with somebody that you know, absolutely love and appreciate and welcome that
check
anytime.
for just organizational capacity with no any type of strings that she has to create a brand new
you
program.
know what, it's fine too, as long as it's in alignment with what we do. Right.
Well, sometimes in my mind, like I always look at it like it kind of like artists have been dealing with this for forever, where they're all like, hey, by the way, could you play this wedding and it'll be great exposure for you. I think a lot of people like sometimes like, hello nonprofit, could you do this? It'll be good exposure for your nonprofit. Like, well, thank you, I appreciate you trying to give me the exposure, but what would be nice if you could just pay for the service. That would be good too.
It's funny because I think I'm mine own worst enemy in that, right? Because of course we could do it all, because we do everything for kids, and I can make it all fit, right? Like I will make that fit, and I'm like, you know what? It really doesn't fit. Like you're forcing it.
Well, that's what Andrew asked me the other day. He's like, hey, do you have time for this? And I'm like, I really should finish off at least one thing that I have currently there. Baking. It's all baking. Or it's plate spinning or something. I'm like, I need to set one thing down or be finished with one thing before I continue just go, this feels like we should do that.
We need to, this is a moment for us to learn from you, see, because both Rob and I are really bad at this, about picking things up and just not finishing them, right? Because there's always something new to do. It sounds to me, you talk about like staying in your lane, saying no to those things. When in your life did you learn how to say no?
I don't know if I have, honestly.
It sounds like you have.
Well,
it sounds like you've
to some degree, yes, right. But so interesting that you say that, because I don't know if you guys know Linda Lopez, but she used to work for Congressman Cardoza years ago, and I was an intern for their office. And she's like, see, you're one of those that starts everything and never finishes anything. And I'm like, wait a second. You're not going to tell me that, right? So now I'm making intentional purpose to get things done, right? So I'm like, thank you, Linda, for that feedback. But no, I have said no, only in that I'm mindful of scope creep now. And then I think of my staff as well. Does my staff, because everything I say yes to, my team has to execute on. Yeah. And is it fair to them? And does it really help us move the needle on what we're trying to achieve overall? Academic achievement, good character and citizenship, and then healthy lifestyles, right? So does it really fit into this bucket of work that we're trying to achieve? And can my team take on one more thing, right? So I am very mindful of what I say yes to now. And if I don't have the capacity to, or if I don't, and I usually check in with my team, I'm like, hey, are you guys ready to go on this? And they usually tell me yes or no. So.
I'm trying to do more of that too, where I'll sit there and check in before I give a yes to anything. Check in with the team to be like, hey, because all I see is potential sometimes. I think that's really where my issue is. I see potential and I'm like, the potential's there. I know we can do it. But now I'm like, hold on, let me check in with the people that are like dealing with most of the details, or like no. They'll be like, stop, stop what you're doing. I'm like, okay, I'm going to respect that. I'm gonna respect that answer.
And I work very closely with my board chair, so I usually do a check-in like, this is where we're going. Do you think the board is going to be behind this work as well, right? Because at the end of the day, it's not about C, it's not about the Boys and Girls Club. It's about what's good for our community, and are we moving in the direction that we need to with our organization? So I try to be mindful of that. So
if I was going to build kind of a pyramid or a funnel out of what I just heard you say, it sounds like you first focus on, when you look at something about taking it on, you're first focused on, does it fit with our mission, right?
Correct.
With what we believe. And then you say, does it fit with our resources, the people that we have and the things that we have? And then finally you kind of look at it in terms of trajectory, right? Does it match the trajectory that we need to head in order to provide the community with what it needs to be provided?
I love how you distilled that.
He's great at that.
Wow.
No, this is just me learning, like I'm making this mental note.
Absolutely.
So now I have this category for, okay, I just have to think, mission, resources, trajectory.
My-
Okay, I
I
can say no.
love it.
My whole life has been
Yes.
throwing things towards this guy and having him then
Can I
distill
borrow
it.
him?
He's amazing at it. I just sit there and I'm like, blah, and then he'll go this. I'm like, yep, that's exactly what.
Let's go to market.
Yeah,
I am just
let's send it right now.
I am just
I
a
love
learner. That's all. I
And,
just learn
and you
lessons.
captured it, so then you can put it on something and distribute this now.
Yeah, that's gonna go on a
I love
YouTube
it.
short right there. That whole
is
sum
really
Well, it's
up.
cool.
absolutely. I'm not self-promoting, but I'm writing some things right now.
Love it.
And that's 100% going in that. That's probably the most important lesson I've learned this week, and I've learned a lot of them. So thank you so much for that.
Oh no, I'm
So
learning
rich.
from all of you, and I'm like, Rob, is he part of the back end office support
He
package?
is actually no. Yep. See, we're
Tapping into resources.
Well,
right
that's
now.
what we're talking about, right? We're talking about like, what your organization is doing. That's going to help us kind of define what United Way can be moving into the future. We look at where we're at now as well, we call it like a rebrand or a reboot, but taking what we're learning, not just from our community, from other United Ways, like you said earlier, right? Across the network that we do have. Like we have an extensive network, and then trying to learn not only best practices, but where our fit can be within this community as a large organization, but knowing that other organizations are doing amazing work, and we want to be able to assist them.
I love it.
Build their capacity, because at the end of the day, I don't need to develop a program for this if there's an organization that is doing that. I'd rather just help them.
Right.
Well, you're giving us a mic, literally.
Literally,
Right now.
right?
You're giving us a mic to share our story, to share what we're doing, that sometimes as nonprofits we don't have the capacity to do, right? Don't have the resources, the last thing we think about.
Well, in my mind, right, it's also too, it's like sometimes we get in go mode. Like, sometimes go, this, I have to do this, I have to do this, I'm doing this. And we forget that, sometimes we let's take a step, let's pretend the mic's not there, and let's just relay your story. Like, why are you passionate about what you're doing? And I think we, once we connect with that a lot, and we kind of, I think we're going to get a lot of, like, if we keep doing this, a lot of interesting stories,
I'm
a lot of
really
interesting
excited.
common
So cool.
themes.
Excited.
I love
Right?
it. I'm so excited for this.
Yeah.
And I think where United Way is where it needs to be, right? It's different from 10, 15, 20 years ago to what it's going to be today, because the needs of the nonprofit or the society right now around this is very different, probably, I would assume.
Well, that's why
Right.
we're passionate about, since we just localized our 2-in-1 program, we've been doing it. We've been running it for a year and a half, maybe.
Yeah, I mean, the actual physical running part of it, about a year and a half, just a little short of a year and a half.
But then for us to be like, okay, so here's what people are actually calling about it, and realizing in certain areas that the sample size is a little small, but knowing that here are the 5 things that people are actually requesting, because when they call our 2-in-1 program, they're calling because they legitimately need help and they don't know where to turn.
Right.
I love it.
And so if I'm able to identify, looking at the data that Andrew sends me, and be like, okay, wow, electric payment assistance is a legitimate need all across the county. So how do we as a organization, as a county, as a collective group, how do we tackle that issue that people
interesting.
can't pay their bills? And that's what they're asking about. Is it
That is
because they don't have the information? Is it because those resources aren't there anymore? Like where like, so now we know, let's investigate that.
Right.
And so, and then I can be like, well, wait a second, if something's coming along, and even like, you and I are just having a coffee or talking, like, you're like, well, wait a second, what about that? See, then that to me is like kind of what gets like organizations working together.
And I think you touched on a really good point, right? The data piece.
Yeah.
That is huge. If we have a way to help nonprofits collect data, if they aren't already, or build their capacity to collect more robust data points, I think that would help us tell a very different story, or confirm the stories that we're hearing at the ground level, right?
Sure.
And I use that as an indicator in my building. It's like, if kids aren't showing up, I need to know why, right?
Right.
If parents aren't bringing their kids, I need to know why. And if there's a spike here, I want to know why also.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it's really important to look at these types of data points and look at what this can implicate for why things are happening the way they are, and how we can address.
I think that's the important thing about moving, especially into the future for a lot of organizations is to realize the importance that data can have to your organization. Huge. Because we'll get locked in, right? We'll get locked into like, well, no, we're going to do it this way because this is the way that it's always worked. Well, is that true anymore? Like, you've been doing the same thing for 15 years. Maybe you need to think about something else because, for you, right? It's like, okay, so we have our building, but wait a second, we did a program here in Gustine and it was hugely popular, right?
Right.
Well, let's investigate that.
We're looking at our blueprint now. I mean, does it make sense to have a center, or does it make more sense to have satellite sites, or is it an and/or, right? And so it's been incredible for us to be able to look at how we can morph ourselves into something else down the road.
And I think that's the exciting to me, what becomes the most exciting about having conversations, like what can we be in the future, like what is a future, so maybe that's the question we can end on, like what is the future, what is the future
to wrap this out,
Boys and Girls Club look like to you?
So I would, and I tell this to my team all the time, if we do our work right, we could be that catalyst for change in this community, right? And it could be any nonprofit. It doesn't have to be the Boys and Girls Club. Is if we do our work right and we convene with the partners that we say that we are going to partner with and convene with them to leverage resources and build out our capacity, then we have the ability to make impact that we haven't seen before, that we've talked about, but we haven't seen before. And what really excites me is I think that most partners, at least locally, are at that point where it's like, yeah, we're done with silos and we're willing to roll up our sleeves and rub elbows with you and let's go get this work done. And that excites me because I think with that mindset, we're going to see the level of impact that we want to see. Well, maybe we don't get to see it because data points are usually 10 years behind, right?
Maybe our children, maybe
our
daughter,
children,
right? Like gets to see something.
Exactly. And I think that I think that's my problem is I'm like super impatient because I'm like, we've done this like too many times, so we just need to move on this already. Super results driven. It's a fault. It is absolutely a fault of mine. But I think that that's what I have to anticipate is this kind of idea that we can drive community impact from this youth serving nonprofit organization that's kind of awkwardly walking sometimes for the last sometimes so many years. And I'm like, there's potential there.
Yeah.
There's potential to drive the impact for our community. So that's what I'm looking at the end of the day.
Amazing. Absolutely amazing. Well, thank you so much for coming and having this conversation with us.
It was fun.
Rob, thank you. As always, it's always a pleasure. Yeah.
I think we're done.
I think that's it.
You guys did great.
That's episode
Thank you for the
you did
opportunity.
amazing. You did incredible.
Yeah. No, I love this.
Good.